Oh, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Swingman podcast. It's podcast number 112. As ever, I'm your host, George Ledger, joined as I am all the time by Louis Halpin and Lewis Howard. So we're going to discuss everything that's gone on in the NBA since we last sat down and spoke. And I'd say the biggest thing probably in the global landscape of the NBA was the Paris game. That was yesterday that we saw the Bulls and the Pistons. It's the first time that Chicago have been in Paris since 1997 when Michael Jordan was there. And just as we're recording this now, someone's just knocked at my door. So I'm going to pass it to you guys and then I'm going to run back.
I will say it was nice. The first thing, being from the UK, obviously, it's nice to actually be able to watch a game at a decent time. Because unless it's an East Coast team, which sometimes you can catch at an all right time, it's pretty bad for us time zone wise. But Pistons Bulls will take. It might not be the most glamorous regular season game, but it was a decent game all in all. It was nice to see. It was nice to see Wembanyama courtside as well. You know, the number one, well, probably future number one pick in the draft anyway, getting to scout out some of the NBA teams, one of which he might be joining because they're not particularly great at the moment.
Wemby in Paris, definitely Wemby in Paris is what the headline seemed to be from that one. I did see Magic Johnson on Twitter said he was the best player in the world, but
that was quite nice that he met Magic. I mean, it's quite nice that they sort of brought out the French legends before the game. Obviously, there's some sour grapes on our end because we'd rather have it in London than, say, Paris. And we couldn't get tickets. We would have gone to Paris if we could have got tickets, but we couldn't, unfortunately. But in fairness, there is a lot more of a track record of French basketball players than there is of English basketball players succeeding in the NBA. Obviously, you got Joakim Noah as a former Defensive Player of the Year. I'd say Tony Parker, though, is probably the most successful overall player that's come from France, and they brought him out before the game, which was quite nice. It was a good bit of a cheer for Killian Hayes, which he probably has never had in his. How many years has he been in the NBA now? Like 3 years or something in the NBA. So that was quite nice for him. Game itself was pretty decent. Get to see DeRozan and Zach LaVine balling out, which the Chicago Bulls are a funny one, aren't they? It feels like 1 week the pendulum swings. They're quite decent. Maybe they should keep it together. They could go for at the minimum, like a first round, second round type thing. Probably not second round. And then the other way where you should be like, oh yeah, they should just trade these guys, get DeRozan to somewhere where he can win. Zach LaVine as well, other guys as well. They've got a decent team, just doesn't seem to be gelling together very well. So the Detroit Pistons are not much to write home about at this moment in time, unfortunately. But like you said, Wembanyama could have been scouted them out. Not sure if Detroit would be his locale of choice. Who knows? He's probably just happy to be anyway.
I'm pretty sure it wouldn't be, but when you're in the NBA, you're in the NBA. I will say though, at least with Detroit, they do have a few nice young players on the come up, so the future's looking bright. Whereas, as you say, with the Bulls, it's a weird one with their team because they do have quite a decent amount of talent. And I just remember back when it first came together. And they went on a really hot streak, and people were thinking, they could maybe do something. And Coach of the Year shouts as well. I'm pretty confident I put a Coach of the Year shout in there early on, but it just hasn't worked out. And I don't know. I think it's partly the talent not meshing together, but I also think even at this point, I think the personalities are starting to clash a little bit. And I don't love speaking about the off the court stuff, because you just, it's all hyperbole really most of the time. But I will say, in terms of where it's heading, I do think it's probably going down rather than going up.
The sad thing is, I think it would be a better situation if Lonzo Ball was there. Obviously, he's been injured for a long, long time now. And it felt like he was kind of, after a tough, I think you'd say a first couple of tough years in the NBA, he had obviously quite a bit of expectation coming in the draft. His dad was probably a big part of that, but he was also selected by the Lakers. Magic Johnson himself selecting a point guard. It's kind of, it kind of wrote itself, that hype anyway. And then New Orleans, he was decent there for the last couple of years, but the team wasn't great. And then he came to Chicago. The first couple of months, it seemed like he'd really found his spot, and everyone was thinking, oh, why don't we pay this guy? Because he's just a cerebral playmaker, not a go-to scorer, I would say, but he can do it, and his shot's got a lot better. But since then, it's just been injury issue after injury issue. And I think you talk about the personalities. Obviously, DeRozan and Zach LaVine are clear scorers. No, it's Io. I might have pronounced Io Deson.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember. I wouldn't be able to pronounce his last name if I tried. But he's a good player, but he's not Lonzo. And I think him sort of distributing the play a little bit and giving people their spots that they need may help that situation slightly. But they have like 3 players, because even Vucevic went for 41 against the Warriors the other week. That was pretty crazy. They've got players that can score. I do think there's a personality and just like a play style issue there, and not great defense either. So, but they're still in the Eastern Conference sort of like playing mix, which is probably not the place you want to be. But
yeah. I think you're right when I talk about the personality. I think it actually does stem from the on the court issues first. I think it's the frustrations from that then boil over. I don't think it's a purely off the court thing. So maybe if they figured it out on the court, everything else would fit into place.
It's a interesting question more than anything, because maybe like a personality thing stems from, I feel like the best player on that team is DeRozan, and I think you give the ball to him when it's late on because he's a clutch scorer. But Zach LaVine may feel a different way. He may feel like, I'm good enough to be the best player on a lot of teams in the NBA, but how far is Zach LaVine taking you if he's the best player on your team? I'm not quite sure. He was the best player on that team for a good couple of years, and they didn't get anywhere. So yeah, they're interesting pieces, because I think if Zach LaVine, say, were to go to, this doesn't make sense contract wise probably, but like the Mavericks or something like that, him and Luka, that could be an interesting combination. Or anywhere where he's like a second or third guy in a decent team, I'd be interested to see. But I'm not sure which teams can sort of come up with like a enticing trade for that, particularly at this moment in time anyway.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I know no solutions for trade scenarios with Zach LaVine, so I wouldn't be able to say. I will say as well. Go on.
I was going to say he's a bit more expendable than, say, someone like Bradley Beal, who's earning like $2 billion a season or something like that. Ridiculous.
Yeah. The one thing I will say from the Paris game as well, you're talking about Wembanyama and Magic Johnson. I saw the photo of them posing together, and it just, I realised how tall he is anyway, but it just drove it home that Magic Johnson, who's around 6'9", you just see him standing next to him, and he absolutely dwarfs him, and you just like the way this guy moves and how tall he actually is standing next to some of these players who are known for being incredibly tall for their position. It's like, my God, he really is a giant.
He's going to be quite transformational for whoever gets him is going to be. It's going to be quite, because I think when it was coming out, he done those games over here over in America in the summer, and they were saying like, this guy's the best prospect since like LeBron. Maybe that's hyperbole. It feels like the only thing that can hold him back really is the injuries, because he's a big, tall, skinny man, and that
he's moving a lot.
Yeah. You've seen Chet, obviously. Well, we haven't seen Chet. That's the whole issue. It could, that's the only thing that worries me slightly.
I mean, there's the worries, but none of them are off-putting enough to not.
No,
the guy's going to be generational. You can't ifs and muts on injuries, but I was just looking at when you mentioned the Zach LaVine with the Mavs trade. I just went on the trade machine builder on ESPN. I was looking through it, and I mean, there's stuff they can do. I don't really know what in terms of picks that the Mavs have got to trade with. But I mean, Dinwiddie and Hardaway Jr.'s contracts match up very nicely with Zach LaVine in general, in terms of especially with their cap space they've got. But I'm not sure what else they can do for it. I don't think the Mavs, they need to strengthen. And I know Luke has mentioned it, but that's a conversation for later on in February, I'd say. But yeah, the Paris game is cool. I saw Adam Silver say that it's not necessarily what they look to achieve in these things, but they said this is the closest that we can get to a European All-Star game, which I wasn't a fan of hearing that necessarily, because I thought that I'd like to see more of these on a more consistent basis from the NBA. I know they did the one with the Bucks and the Hawks in Abu Dhabi earlier in the season, and obviously they try to do a European game every year or so, but I don't want to call it a European All-Star game. I want to just see a general NBA game in Europe.
Yeah.
I mean, the issue is just the sheer volume of games that the NBA players play, that having to travel around America is already quite the schedule, and then having to do games in Europe on top of that, it's just so hard to fit them in, I think.
Yeah. I mean, if I was being fair as well, they probably should just keep doing it in different cities in Europe, not stay in one place for too long, even though I want it to come back to London. But there's obviously a big basketball fan base or big basketball culture in countries like Spain, So, yeah, it's a difficult one for them to figure out, I guess, because like you said, the logistics of everything must be really difficult.
Yeah, I'm just looking at some of the stuff for it. It's hard, but I think we will see more and more of it in the future, especially in European countries. I think there'll definitely be a Germany game at some point. I don't think they're looking at it so on as structurally next to each other. But what the NFL have done in terms of bringing it over into London and having that secured rights, I don't think it'll ever be like that. But I think that's their sort of aim, is to try and build the global brand of it and go elsewhere.
Yeah, I mean, the issue is the NFL's the NFL players play way less games, and the games are way more spread out. So it's just way more feasible for them. Whereas, you got to think about that, what the players have got to go through to be able to do multiple European games. It'd just be so tough.
There was some decent stars out on show as well. I did see in Paris. Obviously, normally you'd have expected Mbappe and Neymar and Hakimi to have been there. They wasn't. They had some PSG All-Star game in was it in Saudi Arabia, or was it in? I think it was in Qatar, wasn't it? It was one of the World Cup stadiums, I think, that they used for it. But they weren't there. There was a few F1 stars and few on and whatnot. Gerard Piqué was there. But this is the likes of it. When you go, I'm just scrolling through some of the shots that I'm seeing of it. But this is what the attraction is of the NBA in the global brand for it. Unfortunately, us three and Nathan weren't there. That would have been the hottest celebrities at the at the Paris game. But
right next to Magic, we had our seats,
right next to it was where Esteban Ocon was with Charles Leclerc, and then Naomi Campbell, I think, was the other side. But anyway. Right, we'll wrap the Paris game up. We'll move on. We'll get back to official business, and I think there's no better time to talk about lighting the beam and Sacramento, because they've been on an absolute tear for the Kings. They're third in the West, which is for any point in the season is nuts to describe them. Is this sort of a flash in the pan, or do we actually expect the Kings to solidify a top position in the West come the end of the season?
I think it's very possible they're in it with a home court advantage, definitely, because, I mean, I think probably the guy that may be taking most of the headlines at the minute is Sabonis, because he's obviously like the new guy there. I've said before on this podcast, pretty much everything they do runs through him. He's kind of like a poorer man's Jokic, and I'm not trying to insult him with that whatsoever, but everything goes through him, and he's obviously such a great distributor at his height. It just seems to work for them really well. But De'Aaron Fox, he's gone through, I'd say, a couple sort of like years where you kind of know he's there, but you don't really care that much, basically, because we all know his talent. He's pretty electrifying with his pace and his explosiveness. Kind of like a poor man's Ja Morant, if I'm quite honest. But he's had some issues, I would say, in sort of creating the environment for winning basketball. He's not very good. He's not been very good, basically, late on in games, and that's kind of in the regular season. That's going to win you the majority of your games, basically, if you can play well in those quarters. And he seems to have really developed that gene, I think, this year. So fair play to him, and they've got a load of decent role players coming in and out. Malik Monk, I really like. Davion Mitchell, they drafted last year. So they have a solid squad. And room for sort of improvement, you would say, as well. That Harrison Barnes, we talked about that last week as well. They could maybe move him on, but I doubt that's going to happen. So yeah, I can see them definitely solidifying a home court advantage. Do I think they're going to make any noise in the playoffs? I wouldn't like to see them. I'll say that. But I'll tell you one thing is their interior defense is absolutely horrific. I saw a stat about it, and they let people get to the bucket quite easily, and that's probably like a trade that I would be more sort of looking at for them, someone like a rim protector. And so I was thinking through these names. I was like, oh, maybe Miles Turner would be good there. I was like, oh, we've had 4 years of Sabonis, Miles Turner. Let's just leave that out now.
Yeah.
let's just not bother with something like that. So that's the area I think they're going to have to improve in significantly, because I'm not sure who they'll come up against, because it's obviously so fluid at the moment, but anyone in the playoffs, there's going to be someone who can get to the basket and score quite a lot against them if it comes down to it.
Yeah, I mean the thing with Sacramento is like I think you alluded to it. It's a tale of two sides of the ball with them. I think they put up the most points out of any team in the league. I think they're top three for offensive rating. I think they might be third, but defensive rating, I think they're like 24th. I think when I looked it up, something like that. But their pace is, I think their pace is also sixth or something. So on the offensive side of the ball, as you say, the way they're playing now with most of it going through Sabonis, they're a very fluid team. They get the ball out quick and they do rack up the points, but they are missing, as you say, that inside presence defensively. They're not there. And what would worry me potentially is one, as you say, when it comes to playoff basketball, and you look in those fourth quarters, those last few minutes, who do you get the ball to take you home? Maybe you're less confident with who's on Sacramento's team than the team that will be playing in the playoffs. And also in the playoffs, when the game is slowing down, will that offense suffer a little bit? And then will their defense, they'll more light will get shed on their defense, and that might be their downfall. I don't really know, purely because they're such a new team and it's a new dynamic that I don't think you can really make those predictions yet. But in terms of just the regular season, I do think with how quite a lot of these Western Conference teams are, I don't know about struggling, but they're at that just under 500. Maybe Sacramento could keep that little bit of a gap they've got at the moment and push for maybe like a fourth seed, something like that. I think if they could get a home playoff game in the first round, that would be a massive success for them in year one of this experiment. So even no matter what you say on this, whether you believe that they'll be able to keep it up, they might regress a little bit. I think it's still a positive sign for this franchise where they've looked better now than they have in quite a few years previous.
So, I mean, I completely agree with what you're saying. The thing with the Kings, though, is that obviously this is the first year of this new outfit. And when you look at it in the context of there can actually be someone sitting in a pub in England who is older than the last time the Kings made the playoffs. I think they'll take this any day long of the run. Yeah. If they're a little bit stretched on the floor and they're not as good at the rim, they'll take it for the first year.
Yeah.
So for what they're doing, I saw someone on Twitter had like a $600 or $800 bet for them to win their specific division, and it paid like 60 grand. So what on earth he was on when he made that bet? Fair play. But the Kings are just, for what they are, they're an entertaining team right now. They've got that unpredictability, but it'll get found out in the playoffs, and then they move next year and they try and just build on it. That's
yeah,
what it
probably.
is.
They just need to end that run, don't they? It's just quite embarrassing. It's not even like the biggest NBA one. I think it's the biggest playoff drought in American professional sports. I think that's the.
I don't know that. Is that? Yeah, I mean,
that's a legitimate fact. In fairness, so
yes, 2005,
they just need
2006. The last time
they need to end.
So no idea about the others.
Yeah, they need to end that curse. I did actually put a bet on at the start of the season for the over-under on Sacramento because it was pretty low, and I was like, I quite like that team. You know, Herter's another guy. I like Herter. I've always liked Herter. He was big in the playoffs, got to the Eastern Conference Finals.
Yeah, at Hawks, I remember that.
So, and I like the little thing they do with the chain for every like best player of the game. Have you seen that? They got the big Kings chain, and they give it to the man who's had the best game. It's pretty
so
cool.
You want your own King's chain? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I'm not that big of a Kings man. I think they're probably taking the Minnesota Timberwolves spot as like, oh no, that's the nice team doing well at this year. They got good vibes, and the Minnesota Timberwolves do not particularly.
Right. No, definitely.
But yeah, I'm glad to see them doing well. Definitely.
All right, let's talk about a team that are not doing well. Is it out of time in Oregon? Now, I've put this down primarily because of one small thing I saw that the Trailblazers were potentially looking at moving on Damian Lillard. Now, and me and Lewis have spoken about this a little bit beforehand, what would you define success for the Blazers in order for them to keep or justify keeping Damian Lillard at the ball club? Because they're sitting in 12th right now in the Western Conference. They're 21-24. You can pretty much scratch off the Rockets and the Spurs from anything because they're just purposefully losing games. So you've got 13 teams in the West, all of which could quite comfortably make the play-ins, you could argue. So where do the Blazers need to be to justify keeping him another year, not blowing it up and giving your Shaden Sharps and your Anthony Simons more minutes and acquiring a bunch of picks?
Well, I know we're having this conversation before. I just don't see any scenario where the Blazers front office says, okay, you know what, we're blowing it up. Because the only player they've got that would deem it blowing it up would be Damian Lillard. Like if you get rid of Nurkic or Jeremy Grant, that's not blowing it up because they're not. There's only one big star player in that team, and you're not. I just don't see how you get rid of someone like a Lillard who has shown that he's got quite a bit of loyalty to your franchise. So are you that worried about him, leaving in the future for nothing? Not, I wouldn't say you are massively, although he is definitely growing frustrated with what you've been able to do to put stuff around him. But also, Lillard's still top 3 point guard in the league, maybe top 5. I don't think you can go any lower than top 5. So do you really want to give up someone like that to acquire some picks and rebuild it again? Personally, I'd say no. I just don't see a world in which that happens.
For me, I lean along the same lines as Lewis purely because I don't see where the trade comes from. This mid-season, basically, coming up to the deadline. If we're talking about that, if it's a summer, I think they've got to do it now. Basically, I've thought this about the Blazers for the last couple of years. If I'm quite honest, I just think they have been in the perennial sort of like mid zone. And there were times, where they obviously got to the Western Conference Finals a couple of years ago, and you can justify it a little bit because, you didn't really expect that franchise doesn't have the sort of weight of expectations as some of the bigger ones on it. The only thing I could come up with is just that the prize we just talked about, Wembanyama, but there's also Scoot Henderson as well, and others in that draft class that seem really quite talented. They'll get a high draft pick regardless because they're not going to get in the play-in, are they? Let's be honest. So they'll get that. So I think I'll just wait until summer, and then I think then you get the better offers, basically the better options. Teams are sort of thinking, oh, maybe we can go for it this way. But I'm really finding it difficult to find a landing spot for him, if I'm quite honest. Just looking around the league, he earns so much money. You got to realise.
Granted, yeah. The amount of money he's on 42 over 5 years, right? Mm-hmm. So if you put it like it's not impossible to move him, but let's say it's highly unlikely he gets moved before the trade deadline in February. If the Blazers take the look of we're not going to do anything this season, and they start to then look. Granted, you said it's not worth blowing it up over players like Jeremy Grant and Nurkic, but these are players that other teams could definitely take, and they would be very good role players and good players on these sides that are trying to push on. So could you see them maybe keeping Lillard? You see these scenarios where players get benched. He's never going to get benched and told not to play. He's too good for that. He wouldn't do that anyway. He's not like when John Wall got told he's not going to play because they're just going to rest him to make sure he doesn't get injured and something. He's way, way too good for that. But I could see a scenario and a world where your Josh Harts, your Nurkic's, your Jeremy Grants, they potentially get moved in anticipation of a big trade for Damian Lillard in the summer. I can see that.
Yeah, there's potential in that. And obviously the people you would keep there as your core, Shaden Sharp, I quite like him.
Yep.
And Anthony Simons as well, who they signed in the offseason, didn't they, to a pretty big contract. And I think he's a really good player as well. And that's a decent core to really build with, I think, going forward, in my estimations. They were good earlier on in the season with those types of players. So that makes sense to me a little bit more. Yeah, just like the sort of supporting characters in that team getting traded off. And then you get Dame, his big move in the summer, and you let him go to somewhere where he can win his first championship. I think that's probably the best outcome or scenario.
Yeah, it's just personally for me, unless Lillard literally comes and tells you, I want to be traded, trade me in the summer, and then as a franchise you've probably got to respect that considering what he's done and the player power that they have nowadays. Unless that's the case, I just wouldn't trade Lillard personally. I would rather get rid of everyone else apart from the young core, as you say, and Lillard, and just try and build around him again, because he's such a valuable player But
Yeah.
I just don't think it's worth it unless he literally comes and says, I want to leave.
He's been good this season as well. I think 29 points. He's obviously had a couple games out through injury, and that's kind of been the story for him the last couple of years. Last year, definitely. It's something you got to keep in mind. This might be the best value you get for him. He could sort of, as smaller guys tend to do a little bit earlier. I know Chris Paul extended it a little bit more, but I think we're starting to see him kind of decline a little bit now. So yeah, come on. I mean, we'll talk about the injuries in the next section, but I think this you got to think about it in the perspective like you could get some pretty big assets for him, especially if Gobert's going for like 4 draft picks.
I think the Gobert thing is the Gobert thing is not you stick in the ground. It's not what you teams are trying to do it, but it's not what you go off of it for. But anyway, we'll talk about it. Let's move on. Let's talk about we've put Crocked Creek as the subject handle here, but it's just in general. There's been some heavy injuries hitting the league. Kevin Durant, I'd say, is the most notable. Would you say of the ones recently, not including maybe Anthony Davis, but
Devin.
It'll have. I think KD would have the biggest effect on potentially the outcome of the playoffs. Maybe is probably the biggest one if it was to sustain for a long period of time.
So he was ruled out for a month, wasn't he, Kevin Durant?
I don't think it was much longer than that. If not,
let me have a look. Yeah, I mean they've lost 4 straight, but I think it was a month. But obviously with KD, you're always going to be like, well, if it's a month, it's 6 weeks, and we're going to be very cautious.
He's got an MCL sprain in his right knee. Reevaluated in 2 weeks. That was January 9th. So it'll be reevaluated around next week or so. Not great. I think they've done enough now where they're like, because this kind of happened at the same time last year as well with KD. He got injured about the same point, and they just went on an absolute landslide. That's a good thing. They went on an absolute slide through the rest of the season, and they had to play in the play-in tournament. That could happen again. I can't lie.
I saw his replacement, Joe Harris, who came in and put up a Tony Snell of a stat line of 15. It was like 18 minutes, and he had like 0, 1 assist, and he had 3 from 3 or something like that.
He didn't go through the full cardio.
No, he didn't go for that.
0.
He got something on the stat line, but it was just 1.
That's disappointing.
Yeah.
But I don't believe in Kyrie as like the first option anymore. I just don't think I think he's much, much better when he's the secondary guy. And I think he's always been better as a secondary guy anyway. You can go back to the Cavs and see that, and the Boston Celtics season where he was the first, it went a bit pear-shaped. I think that's fair to say. So, and but the one I'm not even going to go hard on Kyrie because I do think he's been really good this season. We'll get onto All Stars and everything next week, I guess. But I want to go for this one. Ben Simmons. Do you know how many points? He's averaging this season?
No, I've not. But you look very happy to tell us. So
he's averaging 7.5 points this season. 7.5.
Yeah, it's not.
That is like. I mean, he's never been a prolific scorer, but so first season 15, second season 16, then 14 in his last Philadelphia season. Then he obviously didn't play last season. He's gone down to 7.5. That is alarming. I
assume you're, and I won't call this like a targeted agenda. I assume you're not rattling these off from memory. I assume you have his stats.
No, I do have this up.
Is he taking near the same field goals? Like, is he attempting?
I'm going to guess not.
Because it's got to be off.
Oh,
no,
he's taking like
half the amount.
Yeah, but that's the issue.
That is the issue. It's not.
Is that an issue in terms of he's being instructed to not do this, or is because when you're in a team with Kyrie and Kevin Durant, do you want Ben Simmons taking your field goals like the majority?
No, but you want him to average more than 7.5, and you want him to be a bit more aggressive. And it's the problems that people have had with Ben Simmons for not a while, but in recent times, that's been the main thing. Is it seems like he has that mental block, and he isn't playing super aggressive. I know there was another one of those clips recently where he gave up a layup or something along those lines. And
another one.
And you see it and you think maybe he's still got those that mental block that he had previously that you'd probably want to see gone by now that he's getting a decent amount of time on this Nets team. You know, obviously Ben Simmons, minus the shooting that has been well documented, has got all the talent in the world, and he is one of the premier defenders in the NBA who you thought would be a great fit on this Nets team. Has it come to fruition yet? No, even though the Nets are doing pretty well at the moment, and could it come to fruition in the future? Yes, but it's one of those things where you're waiting and and you know time's going on, and you know KD's not getting any younger, and he's already out for a month now. So you really need to see those results now.
There's a point though. I mean, Kevin Durant, Ben Simmons is 26, so we get to a point where we stop talking about potential, and we're like, "This." Yeah,
that's what I mean.
So I've long given up that if he starts shooting, he'll be amazing. He's never going to do it, I don't think.
Oh yeah, I'm not even talking about the shot.
It's not that as well. But is this just not what Ben Simmons is now? Like, have we seen enough now to where we quantify that he isn't as good as what was first anticipated, and that these sky high sort of, I don't know the word for it, I can't really think of, these sky high sort of thoughts and projections that everyone said, they're just not feasible. It's unfair to keep comparing him to this. I know he's earning a lot of money for it, but this is Ben Simmons, is what we're saying.
I mean, the expectations of getting a shot are gone, obviously. Like, no one's expecting him to be pulling up from three regularly every game. But I think the reason why people still believe there's more to come from Ben Simmons is he was better previously than he has currently been now, is the main thing, I think. If he goes back to what he was doing in his early days at Philly, you know, he's an all-star every year. But, so that, and that's fine. You know, you want an all-star every year and Ben Simmons to go along with Kyrie and KD, you're probably at least have a very good shot of winning the chip, if not winning the chip. But he's not like that now. And I think the reason why people hold out so much hope for him is it's not a skills issue. It's not a physical issue. It seems like it is just a mental block that he needs to get over. But as you say, you know, it's gone on for quite a while now. We have been waiting for it and it hasn't come yet. But I still hold faith, and a lot of people still do hold faith, that Ben Simmons can go back to being that perennial all-star.
Yeah. It for me, I'm not ever expecting him to develop like a jump shot. I just want him to go to the basket a little bit more. And I think part of it is a mental block because, you know, he did have some pretty significant injury issues last year. And obviously before that was the famous Atlanta passing up a dunk on Trae Young and that type of thing. I just don't think he's wired that way, really. He's thinking about the pass. And people can say that's an excuse, but I do think that's how he's genuinely wired as a player. He's more of a playmaker than he is a scorer. I also think he's scared of taking free throws, and I honestly do think he's very scared of going to the line.
Very much agree.
And I think that's why he doesn't do it as much as he should do. But he's averaging less points than Draymond Green at the moment, which in my estimation is absolutely pathetic. He's like 7 years younger than him, and Draymond's never been good at scoring. So if they're going to survive without KD, coming back round to the original point, if they're going to survive without KD, they need him to be doing more. And Kyrie's doing, I think, what I expect Kyrie to do. I'm not really putting anything more on him, but I know this, like Lewis said, Ben Simmons was better than he was. He was better than he is at this moment in time, and he needs to get back to that.
I think that's unfair. Draymond's got that dog in him, so
he doesn't. I mean, he definitely, that is undeniable.
Last game they just played against the Celtics, he took a three that absolutely classic.
Yeah. That was the Luke Cornett one, didn't he? Yeah, like miles away. He's not taking 3-pointers anymore, Draymond. He hardly takes a shot anymore. But you know, he's still averaging more than Ben Simmons, so that's something at the very least. But there's a few more crocked issues, I suppose we can. I wanted to talk, we said about Devin Booker as well. He's been out for a little bit, and the Suns have just absolutely slid down the table. They're in a real, actual tough position at this moment in time. I think they're 21, 24?
22 and 24. Yeah.
Okay. So, you know, that he'll probably be back relatively soon. I'm not too sure what is the estimate on that. I think it might be another 2 weeks, actually, I saw last time.
The thing,
oh my god! Okay, that is so much worse than I expected. He's reevaluated in 4 weeks at the end of December, so he's probably not back until the end of the month, probably longer. And yeah, Chris Paul's not been great. I kind of expect it by now, but DeAndre Ayton, he looks like he's got the bag and run. He's looking pretty poor at this moment in time. He's not developed offensively whatsoever since his second, third season. I'm not sure. He had a good playoffs when they got to the finals, in fairness to him, but there seems to be some issues there, and I think stemming from the whole contract situation in the summer. But yeah, they're in a tough position because could you say to them, we'll trade for someone maybe to bridge us through until Booker gets back, but their trade piece, and they've been trying to trade him all season, is Jay Crowder, and it looks like no one's taken a bite. Basically, it's pretty strange, actually.
But what are you arguing that they're in trouble of what, not making a very?
They're in the trouble.
You're not arguing they're not going to make the play. They're going to make the play, Louis, at minimum.
Let me have a look.
I also did not make the play, and for what it's worth, but I will say
minimum,
I don't think they're particularly great, and I think if you ask me now what would be your prediction for the Suns come the end of the season, it would be a one and done first round playoffs exit, and I think most people would say that. I don't think that's a controversial opinion. I think on top of that as well,
that's too hasty to say, though. I think
it is hasty, but I would also add as well, if you ask people, do you think the Suns' window is closed now? I think everyone would say yes. They're not in championship contention anymore. So even if you don't think maybe it'd be a one and done this year, I do think they are. Unless they do something with trades or something like, then they're on that downwards trajectory now.
So to get into the play-in, they've got to go over basically the Thunder, who could just sort of throw it all in at some stage, as they're known to do. The Warriors, I don't think that's happening.
I don't think the Thunder are going to do that anyway. But
no, I don't think they are either. And I think the Thunder, at this moment in time anyway, without Booker, are a better team than the Suns. Harder to play against, definitely. The Warriors, with Steph back, they're a completely different team. They're going to go up above. Clippers are in 8th. Not great, but I don't think the Suns are going to go over them. Got my beloved Timberwolves in the 7th. There's always a potential for a massive part of the Timberwolves, I'm not going to lie. But there's not much in between it.
Yeah, once you reach the Timberwolves and the Jazz, I mean, there's no point talking about any of the rest of them. But
the Jazz, I forgot, was sick.
So the Jazz are sick. This is what I'm saying, though.
But then you've got the Lakers below them. I think the Lakers might are a better team base when they get Anthony Davis back and the Suns get Devin Booker back. I don't know. It's a bit of a toss-up.
But this is what I'm saying, though, Louis, is that the Lakers are going to get AD back and the Suns are going to get Booker back. If there's 15 games left and they're 3 or 4 games,
there's not many games. There's not many games left. We're halfway through the season. More than halfway through the season.
All right, there's at least 35 games. There's 35 games left, right?
There's not a lot to change your prospects, is it? Really?
Yeah. Oh, it's fair. Booker is here, and when you're saying Booker's out for a month,
Booker's out for at least a couple more weeks. Yeah.
It gets tricky.
It'll be close.
Booker's out for a month. It'll be close. But Anthony Davis isn't exactly a spring chicken and rushing to get back. Yeah. I don't care if he's on court now or anything.
But that's why I'm saying the first round one and done exit. It's not even that.
They could be a play-in. They could be a play-in run and one and done.
I'm saying that. Yeah. If you've got a full strength Sun squad, even if they are bottom of the barrel in the play-ins, right? I'd probably stick because the Suns, their lineup is so. I know it's bad vibes, but their lineup is so good when they're there. It is health and it is health dependent. But I can't sit here. I can't sit here and go, "No, Suns one and done. No, they're rubbish."
But think about who they'd be playing though. That's the problem. Is they might be if they're playing the Nuggets or the Grizzlies, they are just done completely. I think even you'd be happy to jump to that conclusion.
Yes, I would. I
think they'd be done with the Pels. The Kings would be an interesting one if they matched up against them. I guess if they managed to make the play-ins.
Creep up to the 5th seed or whatever.
Well, yeah. That's the thing. It'd be if maybe the Suns moved up.
The Mavs would be an interesting.
Hang on, I've not even looked at it like this. When you went creep up to the 5th seed, they're 2 games, Louis. 2. They're 2 games behind.
They're not good. They're not good. I'm
No,
telling you,
Louis, they're 2 games behind the Mavs.
with
Two.
another 3 or 4 weeks without Devin Booker, I'm gonna say that could extend quite a lot. I mean, they've really slipped because they started off really well.
They're 2 and
I'll
8
give them
last
that.
10. They're 2 and 8 in the last 10.
That's
So
bad.
there's no debate in that. But there's no
Look at my
way.
beloved Timberwolves. They're 7
Yes.
and 3 in the last 10. That is mental.
Well, this is what I mean. If we have another, do you think in the next 10 games the Suns are going to repeat and go 2 and 8? Like, would you? I don't know who they.
They might. They might. I don't know. I'd have to look at who they're playing, but they might.
Let's have a look. Let's go through this right now. The next 10 Suns games. They've got the Pacers next. They could win that because Halliburton's out.
Yeah.
Grizzlies, they're losing. Hornets, they'll beat them. Mavericks, they're losing. Spurs, they'll beat them probably. Raptors, toss up, I think. Hawks. Oh yeah, man. The next 10 games aren't exactly. They're not exactly
tricky.
strong.
They're not tricky. So in 10 games time, even if they go 6 and 4 or 5 and 5, you're then looking at them and you're going, "No, they'll make the play-ins easily. There's no way to worry about
But
it."
the play-ins
I think they'll
not
make the
probably
play-ins, to be fair.
the play-ins not where they want to be.
But
let's be honest, it's not where they want to be.
I completely agree. And if they come against Denver, I will stand aside. But it is not out of the realm. If you go fully fit Suns v the Grizzlies, it is not a done. It's not a foregone conclusion.
I think
it
that's
isn't
a foregone conclusion. I'll be honest.
The
Grizzlies are a very good basketball team.
They're a very good basketball team, but the Suns are a very good basketball team.
I worry about the Grizzlies with their injuries. That's the only thing with Jaren Jackson there. Their defense is.
Yeah, this is full health though. This is assuming full health.
Yeah. I think they're a better. I think the Grizzlies are a better team than the Suns.
I agree they're a better team, but it is harsh and rash to say foregone conclusion because Devin Booker, from what we've ever seen in playoffs, is the best player in that series, and I will stand by that. Well, I will stand by that.
It's very close.
It's close.
It's very close.
For what we've seen in playoffs, I'm giving it to Devin Booker.
John Morant has averaged like 50 points against the Warriors.
Louis, because I'm saying Devin Booker's the best player, it's not me saying John Morant's a terrible NBA player.
No, but John was great in the
playoffs.
playoffs.
He was, but Devin Booker, from what I remember, was better.
Well, what I would say back is, what do you think will happen with the Suns? Because when I say I think they're going to be a one and done first round playoffs, that's just my prediction of what I think they'll be. I'm not saying they can't do anything. I'm saying they can do better. I'm not saying they can do worse. That's just what I think they'll do. So, what do you think will happen to the Suns by the end of the season?
It depends on Devin Booker's fitness.
No. I just want to hear what you think. If fully healthy comes back, they're fine till the end of the season. Where do you think they're going to go?
If I'm looking at the West, hang on, right? So Denver's a lock at the top. I'm expecting the Lakers to climb. I'm expecting the Warriors to climb. I'm expecting the Clippers to climb. I think the Mavs are pretty much. Yeah, I am. I think the Mavs are pretty much, unless they do something, which I know they're looking at. I think the Mavs are kind of at their ceiling point and the 5th in the Western seed. I don't care with Luka unless they get a second guy, and then it's a big adjustment with a second guy anyway. I think you can angle a 5th and 6th seed for them, and then who would that have them playing? What, 5th and 6th seed now? You'd be playing.
They're not getting the 5th and 6th seed.
But they're 2 games away from that. I know Booker's out for a month.
All of those teams I've listed, I think, are better than them. Well, if I'm honest,
I'll do a more. I'm trying to think of the word, but I'll pose this to you then, George. A different question: do you think the Suns are going to get past the first round of the playoffs this season?
Well, that's
he's obviously doesn't.
I just want a yes or no. It's obviously completely hypothetical, but it's just if you ask me that question now, I'd say they would be a one and done team. So that's all I'm asking.
They're going to be playing a good team regardless of. They'll get in the playoffs. They're getting the play-in, but they'll be playing a good team regardless. First round, where they are now, they've put themselves in a pretty poor situation. It's not really their fault because Booker's got injured, but yeah.
It's. It's a compelling argument here, and it's hard to.
Yeah, that's what I mean. That's all I'm saying. I'm not trying to throw too much. Attack them too much. It's just the situation they're in, Booker's injury. I just think they're going to end up playing a team in the first round that is just a better basketball team than they are. And it's one of those things that we've spoken about in the past with other teams where if you have a bad regular season, it's a very difficult thing to just flip a switch and look like a completely different team in the playoffs. That's generally not how these things work. Some teams can do it. Like the Warriors, for example, would be a team that if they managed to do it, I wouldn't be too surprised. But that's because of the faith I've got.
The Warriors
Steph
have got
mainly.
heritage, though. The Warriors have got heritage.
Yeah, and
so.
the culture, and they've got Steph as well, obviously, who's one of the best players in the league. So that's why, as Louis said, we're so far into the season that I would lose faith in the Suns being able to do anything, even though they've got a pretty decent roster still.
The thing that I'd probably say the most of why I would agree that they'd get one and done primarily is because they're very much like the Warriors this year. At home, they're really good. On the road, the Suns are catastrophically bad. So that'll be not. I mean, they can get 4-0'd or whatever, but that'll be the main thing as well for me. I think on the away games, they are horrendously bad. But yeah, I'm pretty much done talking about Phoenix now. Anyway, I don't really like the team as is. It's just what it is.
That was more of a conversation than I thought it was going to be about Phoenix.
Yeah.
I mean, this podcast meant to be about the Paris game primarily, but this is the most enjoyable one of what we've got for it. But do either of you have anything else that you want to hash up now, or we'll save for the All-Star chat that we'll have in sort of 7 to 10 days, I assume?
I'll save it. There's a couple of things that maybe we could touch on, but we're going for
So-
quite a while now.
Yeah,
So.
save it for next time there. So I will wrap that one up there. Thank you very much for watching. If you aren't already, and if you could do so, please, to subscribe to our YouTube channel or follow us on whatever podcast platform you're listening on, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, whatever. In any case, thank you very much for listening, and we'll catch you, like I said, next week to talk about all about All-Star stuff. Bye-bye.